After 2 years, Grounded, the Obsidian-made survival game, is leaving early access with its 1.0 release. Can the final update live up to the promise shown all throughout its time in game preview? Absolutely. Grounded has become not only one of the best survival games you can play, but just a fantastic game overall. If you love RPGs, if you love open world experiences, absolutely pick this game up. If somehow you haven't bought it, somehow you haven't tried it on Games Pass, you're missing out on an experience that has mini survival packed with big moments and a fantastic story that you'd be a fool not to experience right now. Hello ratbags, my name is Jade. I've covered every survival game under the sun. I've also put over 600 hours into Grounded with 350 videos across 2 channels. So it's a safe bet to say I enjoy and like the game. So if you find this review helpful, leave a like, make sure to subscribe for the best in survival games content, and let's go through deeper into why Grounded is one of the best games going. After waking up mysteriously in a backyard, you're tasked with surviving against bugs, insects as you build up your bases, unlock new items, weapons and armour, and hopefully try and survive. As you progress through the game, you're fed nuggets of story, delivered by NPC characters like Burgle here, a talking burger flipping robot, as well as a whole host of lore and story items, from recordings to notes and more, as you try and unravel how exactly you were shrunken down to smaller than an ant. You soon discover a network of secret hidden laboratories, conducting all sorts of crazy experiments, many of which you get to take advantage of. A lot of these experiments created by Wendell, the mad scientist whose backyard you are actually residing in. What happened to Wendell? Why doesn't he like Omnant? Do they really have sinister plans to take over the world? Or is it all just a fevered dream from a mad scientist? Grounded is set in 1990 and it's a great homage to the 80s kid as well as the new generation that was appearing. With 100 throwbacks that old timies like me will remember. Some of its references may be old, but the writing is absolutely top class and really lightens up the game a lot, with hundreds of dialogue written into the game from each of the characters that you can play. There's up to 4 of them: Pete, Hoops, Willow and Max. Their voice lines are the only thing that really separates them, as the combat and the way that you actually change your character is all done via weapons, armour and upgrades. And absolutely one of Grounded's greatest strengths is the RPG and combat mechanics. You're not simply just smacking away at one button hoping to defeat a creature before it eats your face. There's a fantastic combat experience here, rivaling almost on the same level as Dark Souls. Alright, maybe that's a bit hyperbolic, but you can certainly parry, you can attack in different ways, you've got shields to use, as well as a whole host of different weapons to really mix up your playstyle and how you prefer to deal with the bugs in the backyard. It's simply one of the best combat systems I've seen in a survival game, beating Conan Exile's jankiness hands down. The animations are almost flawless, you really feel like you're connecting with every blow, and the animals and insects in the game really respond to you and try different ways to attack you, with fantastic animations and different phase attacks from many of them. I'm going to try and not show too many of the spiders, just for the arachnophobes out there. Of course, Grounded famously has a mode where you can reduce the spiders to nothing more than plump puddings, but don't worry, you're still going to be scared by the whole plethora of other bugs and insects in the backyard that are equally greatly animated and give me the heebie-jeebies. The cartoon style of Grounded might not be for everyone, but don't dismiss it just because it's got a more of a distinct, unique look. Grounded is absolutely a gorgeous game with environmental and atmosphere rivaling anything you'd have come across. Because it is so stylised, it'll actually probably hold up a lot better than contemporary survival games trying to be ultra realistic that often looked faded after only a couple of years. Anyway, let's return back to what I was mentioning, which was the combat, and it's just fantastic the variety of different ways that you can take on the bugs. The devs worked hard in early access, going from every player's kind of cheese method of just shooting creatures while standing on a rock. The bugs will now flank, they'll run away, they'll come back when they're on the ground, and they'll come up with new divisive ways to try and get you down. The AI for the bugs is some of the best I've seen. They don't just mindlessly run for you at every occasion. They flank, they move about, they find the perfect spot, and they use the different attack combinations. The way you can enhance your weapons and armour is pretty cool too, with various different rocks like marble that you need to gather and then refine into certain upgrade materials to give either your weapons a much needed boost or help out even just with their durability. This is where a lot of the RPG and survival mechanics blend really well. You will have to grind a substantial amount to get the maximum upgrades you can for your weapons and gear, requiring a whole host of bug parts and natural resources that you'll find out in the yard. You can even apply elemental damage types to your weapons to really go against some of the strengths and weaknesses from the bugs, which they have many, with an in-game peep system where you can spot the bugs and add them to a collection of cards that give you the lowdown on their strengths, weaknesses and maybe a bit more. There's a ridiculous amount of weapons and gear in the game, particularly with the armor sets. You can find one that suits your playstyle down to a T, and you can upgrade it further to unlock even more perks. Of course, again, a lot of these are made from the actual bug parts, so you're going to be killing a hell of a lot of the creatures in the backyard to maximise your gear. Just when you think maybe later on in the game that things get a bit too easy once you start getting these upgrades or different sets of weapons and armour, it throws a curveball at you with the brand new upper yards that was added as part of the 1.0 update. I'm trying to avoid certain spoilers for some of the long time grounded viewers and players out there, but let's just say once you get into that area, you're going to need the biggest and maximum gear that you can get hold of, as there's certainly some brand new creatures that will be tough to beat. If you always enjoyed Conan's combat system over something like Ark, you're going to love Grounded, the way that you can move around and really get a more personal character developed using gear and items. Grounded can be a tough as nails survival game, despite its cute and cozy look. The infusion of survival and RPG works better here than anywhere else I've ever really seen it. The pure survival aspects are absolutely there in terms of gathering resources, and it hasn't been nullified by the implementation of story or RPG. Mutations are another big feature of Grounded, how to increase or give yourself perks for any kind of given situation. Perks that will give you more damage against ants, more damage with certain weapons, or just perks that help you move around the yard quicker. That combined with specific weapons and armour that you'll need to explore certain biomes like the ponds using diving gear or the haze using a breathing mask makes Grounded pretty unique in needing gear to progress. And absolutely another core strength of Grounded is the map and its atmosphere. There definitely might come a time in a couple of years where we might be a bit stale of exploring just the backyard, much like Conan, as I mentioned earlier, had problems with its map being relatively small. But the world just feels so much more alive in Grounded, with the different atmospheres and times of day really showing a difference between night and day, where you really don't want to explore in the dark and the fog, to the burning bright sun that cascades across the yard. Grounded atmosphere is rivaling the best like Ark Survival Evolved. It's a beautiful handcrafted map with many mysteries to be solved, nothing to do with the story in certain cases, but adding even more playability. The use of construction and building is every builder's dream, and they even went one step further than what most games do. They had a reason for you having a base, where sometimes you will have to encounter some bug attacks that will try and take you down. These horde style mini events can absolutely ruin your day when you're not planned for it. They don't happen as often as they did during early access, seemingly nerfed quite a bit, but they really do add an injection of excitement sometimes to really keep the game fresh. It is honestly a truly terrifying experience going into the oak tree and facing off against some of the most toughest creatures in the game at night time. You really don't want to be messing with these. Or maybe you do, as it might be the only way that you see them, the reds of their eyes. And yes, I know I said I wouldn't show any spiders, but look at them, they're terrifying! If that all sounds a bit too much with the combat, the actual survival mechanics and a world filled with unique creatures, then you can actually make the game a whole lot easier. There's a whole bunch of different customization options. You can play it strictly as an RPG if you want, turning off all survival aspects. You can make it a creative sandbox where you do nothing but just gather resources and build. Much like a lot of modern games nowadays in the survival genre, you can tailor it to how you want, but Grounded certainly has a lot more options than most. So that combination of great combat, great AI, creatures galore and a map that's well worth exploring, Grounded will keep you occupied, the casual player, for at least 50 hours or more. If you're into base building on a big way or doing a lot of the replayability options that are available in Grounded, you could easily get hundreds of hours out of the game. It's almost absurd how much value there is for just $40. All of them great points combine into something bigger than its sum, and with the 1.0 update we finally get the reveal of more of the story, the reasons why we're here, and whether or not we will make it home. So many good reasons to buy this game. Are there any negative reasons that might put you off? Honestly, no. A few tiny minor little gripes that I'm sure will be resolved in the future updates, and the game is going to be supported for years to come by all accounts. But yeah, I did notice some of the later game areas in the upper yards, some tunnels, did feel a bit even more sparse than some of the regular ones that you encounter, like no foliage in them at all, so it felt like they maybe were just chucked in there just to get a means to an end or have some extra places to explore for quick loot. The devs also added shared world feature, something pretty unique not too many games are doing, where when you leave or quit your world, your friends can carry on playing if you share that world with them and gather more resources. And so you can set a persistent world between you and some of your pals, or just share something you've made with up to 50 people on your Xbox friends list. As good as it is, it's not the dedicated server that I really would have loved to have seen added in Grounded, but it's the closest next best thing. And it has to be said, some items even the devs put on their features board haven't made it to 1.0, and they've kind of let us know that there would be some of that content prioritised over others. Things like possibilities of having control of ants as more of a really game mechanic, rather than the pets that you can have at the moment, which is just aphids, weevils and gnats. I'm not going to sit here and criticise it for the game, it isn't. It isn't Ark Survival Evolved. You're not going to be riding ladybugs or flying on bees. I myself have various times gone back and forth whether or not I think Grounded needed it. If it did ever come in some shape or format in a DLC or update in the future, it would be an added bonus, but it doesn't detract from the game just because it doesn't have certain mechanics in it. Instead of an experience system like most survival or RPG games, Grounded has you collecting these milk molders. These will give you the chance to boost your health or stamina, or how many arrows you can carry or resources. Trouble is, you can't actually start gathering them until you get a tier 2 hammer, and surprisingly that might be a bit of a way, as you need to kill 2 distinct bugs to get it. I've asked for a long time for some way to either have a tier 1 upgrade like a mega milk or milk molar that could be easily got with just a regular hammer, but it does look like you are going to have to just spend a bit of time in the game before you can start upgrading your character. And there's no way to re-spec your character either, but there is enough milk molars to max upgrade your character, but it is going to take a good amount of time finding them. They're scattered all across the yard. Grounded has a lot of decorations. You've got all sorts of stuffed bugs that you can make using obviously the bug parts that you've gathered. But the later bugs that you come across, some of the newer ones, there aren't the equivalent. That's why it makes me feel like the game has kind of just been rushed in the very last stages, or it's just some of them things that might end up being in a quality of life update. Equally, a lot of the later game bugs you don't really use in terms of making smoothies or meals, the consumables that give you buffs either. So that one aspect, that's why it feels a little bit rushed certain parts of the game, but I'm sure that might get retinkered with some sort of cozy update in the future where they'll add more of the stuffed bugs and maybe retool some of the foods. Going back to the positive stuff, what Grounded really has improved on in early access has always been things like the combat, the world building, the dungeons, but they've also had a whole ton more bosses to fight now as well in the game, and replayability. But really, they're minor gripes that, like I said, could be seen fixed at a later date. It doesn't detract from the overall experience in the slightest, only for maybe hardcore fans that have stuck with the game for the last 2 years. The devs have gone to great strides to make replayability a factor in Grounded, or just give you some more things to do rather than just survive and thrive. You've got base defense. Bugs will periodically attack you the more that you spend time in their environment killing them, and although it's been watered down a little bit, it's still more of a challenge and something to freshen up an experience or playthrough. On top of that, you can also summon waves of creatures, creating gauntlets for you and your friends to challenge yourself, where the bugs will attack a certain point once you've fed a special little crafting station full of bug parts. Factor in the mixers, certain point of defences spread across the map that will give you a special reward once you complete them all. It's an optional side feature of the game, but definitely adds more playtime to it. And without too many spoilers, let's just say you're going to have to get used to that mechanic because it's part of the end game. And of course, being able to peep creatures, spotting them gives you a kind of card against their weaknesses and strengths, and you can use that knowledge to hopefully defeat them easier next time. But you can get gold versions of these that you can only get once you've gathered or killed a bunch of them. It's a random percent droppage, but it will keep you busy if you want to get all the gold cards. And of course, along with a healthy dose of achievements or trophies, you will also get the chance to go and collect a bunch of scabs that mix up the colours of your UI. Some pretty garish, like this hot dog one that I absolutely love. So again, giving more replayability, or at least more game time, trying to find them all. Also new as part of the full release is the game report card system. Once you complete the game, you actually get given a little bit of a heads up on how well you did, and there's going to be different ways that you can increase that score and get a better one. So that will also add a huge ton of replayability, especially for speedrunners. They also added some new building materials for the 1.0 update, so builders will again be happy as there's plenty of stuff to do in creating the best castles and forts. Grounded will have a bright future. I'm sure we're going to get DLC and updates, either adding more explorable places like other yards, or maybe into the house, which is so many of the player base really want to experience, or maybe just more bosses or more features, new items, creatures and more. Absolutely, Grounded has been one of the best games I've seen grow over that time. They hit early access running and they really never stopped, adding update after update. At one point I wanted them to go turbo. I thought with Microsoft backing them they'd get hundreds of developers on board since it was such a success, but that would have ruined the vibe from it. It really do get something special when you've got small teams working on something rather than hundreds, and Grounded has done a fantastic job of keeping updates coming at a relatively good pace. There's plenty of room for more ideas for DLC, like I said, and I can't wait to see what that future holds. But right now the game is more than worth your time and money. I've covered over 150 different survival games in the last 5 years, and hands down they've been just simply the best. The cadence of updates, the way they've communicated, and responding to fan feedback. So many features of Grounded are a direct result of fans saying, hey, can you add this? Bosses, as you can see from this Mantis boss fight, will give you nightmare fuel for weeks on end. And there's some real surprises in store. I think for longer term players who have kept up to date with all the updates and be looking forward just to this final content patch, I think even they will find it a bit tough to just burn through the content that quickly. And obviously they will still always just want more because they've experienced the game for the last 2 years. But for a brand new player stepping into the backyard for the first time, you've got hour upon hour of content, quality content with fantastic systems, with combat, with world exploring, atmosphere, story and more. I haven't really mentioned too much about the VFX, which is simply astounding. The way the particles go through, the different effects from the weapons, the attacks from the enemies, it truly is epic stuff, as well as the music, which is fantastic as well. But the biggest parts for me have always been the map, the atmosphere, and the way that it does feel like it's melding perfectly RPG, story and survival all together. It's been a privilege to see Grounded grow from the very beginning reveal to all the way to 1.0. Big shout out to Obsidian for providing me with the 1.0 review code ahead of time. I'm ashamedly a fanboy. I love this game, I love the devs, I love what they've done. They've made survival not just generic sandboxes with creatures that just attack you on sight. They've given nuance and real playability to stuff that normally dries out after a while. So there we go, that's my review of Grounded, a fantastic survival game that easily makes it into my top 3. It's a real hard choice of whether or not it beats out Minecraft or Valheim at the moment, but it's hands down better than so many of its other competitors and just a great game on its own, forget the survival aspects. Buy this game if you like a great little story, if you like open world and RPG aspects, if you like running in terror from a huge amount of spiders in the game. Grounded has to be on your purchase list this year. Max, my favourite character in Grounded, often says it ain't lemon crime, but it's better than nothing. Grounded absolutely is lemon crime. Go taste it now.